Hello and Happy New Year. It's the first Book Quote Wednesday of 2026 and the word is happen. Today I'm reading from my space opera novel His Majesty's Starship. 2 copies of this sold in Canada last year, so whoever you are, thank you. Tell your friends. His Majesty's Starship Ark Royal is about to take part in humanity's very first space battle. So an unprecedented event for which the rules have to be made up on the spot. We're in orbit around the first breed home planet, the Roving, and fighting breaks out between the ships of the human delegation to the aliens. So the combatants on either side are human while the aliens observe. Part of the fun of writing this novel was thinking up all the different nations of Earth 200 years in the future. I think this is it, sir. Across the airless flight deck, Nichol was hunched over his desk and staring at the displays. Gilmore abandoned the letter to Joel again and turned his attention to the monitor. Wilde, too, broke out of whatever internal meditation was occupying his thoughts to look. There had already been a false alarm half an hour ago when a cluster of ships at the leading edge of the fleet stopped spinning, which Gilmore suspected would be the first stage of an attack. The ships were behind and just to the right of Pacifica, and for all he knew they might have made their own agreement with the new order. But instead they had boosted out of orbit altogether. Not long after, 3 others, all safely at the rear of the fleet, had done the same, heading in 3 different directions. They should all have done that at the start, Gilmore thought angrily. The 4 ships of Krishnamurthy's alliance couldn't have hoped to subdue the rest of the ships scattered throughout the system. Rule 1 of the manual of space combat that he was mentally drafting would be, if you want to avoid a fight, a clean pair of heels is the best solution. Come to think of it, not an amazing philosophical insight. And now most of the ships that could have scattered had done so. The Israelis, the other 2 Chinas, the rest of the Africas, all the Asian countries, most of the American countries, the Vatican, the Holy Arab Union, all showing far more sense than the ships belonging to Prince James and his friends. The 5 allied ships stayed in formation, Ark Royal considerately hemmed in not just by her friends but by all the opposition all around. Great Zimbabwe above, Long March behind, Shivaji and Pacifica in front. A couple of miles behind Long March sat the South American combine Simon Bolivar and the Galactic Corporation's Excalibur, which so far had stayed silent. The 5 allies hung in space and made a nice juicy target while the enemy gathered round and slavered. Great Zimbabwe and Long March were holding their position, but Shivaji and Pacifica were moving in closer, still out of laser range, but closer, and coming round to face their target. It looked as if this was indeed it. He instinctively checked the time, though the log would already have noted it. 00.05. If the Battle of the Roving went down in history, it would be noted as having happened on 22nd of May, 2149. Rule 2 in the manual would be, if you must design a ship to fight, design it so that it can fire in all directions. The weapons on those ships, like his own, faced forward only. Manoeuvring to fire was a bit of a giveaway, like the old sailing times when ships could chase each other in full view for a day before coming within gun range. "This is Shivaji," said a voice on general band. "Your final chance to signal your surrender." "Say nothing," Gilmore said on the conference band. No one replied. Nichol's voice broke and he coughed to clear his throat. "Incoming." The radar showed a small object streaking towards them from the Pacifica. Without thinking, Gilmore slapped at the laser panel on his desk and the object vanished. Out in space, the first torpedo fired at anger in space had just been vaporized by a beam of coherent light. Rule 3. Your laser AI is unlikely to distinguish between a torpedo and a meteorite, so long as it is clearly heading for your ship. Don't discourage it. "All ships, set your lasers to automatic," Gilmore said. Lasers were usually on manual in orbit in case the computer mistook the intentions of an innocent transport capsule, but exceptions could be made. The one torpedo must have been the test firing, because suddenly Shivaji and Pacifica together let off a cloud of torpedoes. The lasers on Ark Royal, Enterprise and Algol opened up in return, and the two met halfway. The forward viewer showed a new starfield springing into life between the ships as the torpedo exploded and evaporated in bursts of molten light. And through the cloud of seething debris came a fresh wave. The laser systems, half blinded by results of their own success, were slow to react. They recharged and opened up again, but still at least half the newcomers flew on. These weren't nuclear weapons. The Rusties wouldn't have tolerated that, and the aim was to cripple and capture the ships, not destroy them. Half a mile from the ships, the torpedoes burst open and a thick mass of metal hurtled from them. The lasers recalibrated again and opened fire, and then the mass struck the ships. Ark Royal vibrated under the impact. "We're spinning, sir, we're spinning!" Nickel yelped. The gyroscopes and the viewers showed it was true. Ark Royal was spinning slowly around its centre of gravity. "Then correct it," Gilmore said shortly. Training simulators presented worse cases than this. "Aye, aye, sir," said Nickel, chastened, and together they fired the thrusters that steadied the ship. "Where were we hit?" "Leading face of the ring compartment," said Nickel, poring over the instruments. "Hold 4 and aft, but no line severed, and the ring appears to be intact." "Good." Ark Royal's small size had protected her as the grape shot passed, with only one strike on her largest surface area. The larger ships hadn't been so lucky. He could see dark patches in their skins where there had been none before. Gilmore thought that this was how warfare had once been between ships. They sat at a short distance apart and poured broadsides into each other until one was more full of holes than the other. "Ark Royal, your condition, everyone?" said Gilmore. "Roussel's, several forward compartments hold, no casualties." "Enterprise, we... incoming from Long March." A burst of torpedoes from the Chinese ship astern, and now it was the turn of Roussel's and Nikolai to protect the formation. The lasers of two ships against the torpedoes of one was a closer match, and not one got through. As abruptly as it had started, the fighting stopped. The ship still hung in orbit as if none of this had happened. Gilmore slowly relaxed, keeping part of his mind on full alert to see what would happen next. "Excalibur and Simon Bolivar to all ships. We are declaring neutrality and leaving orbit. We will defend ourselves if attacked." The two remaining ships of the fleet that had not yet been caught up in the conflict fired their main engines together. They were astern of Long March, and their course took them beneath the Allies and their attackers, passing between ships and planet. "Thanks for the help," Nickel muttered. "They made a wise decision," Armwile said. "No, they haven't," Gilmore thought. "That course will take them right in front of the enemy's guns. They could have worked that out." The two ships that had almost reached the fleet. Their trajectories were unchanged, but they were bringing their prows up to point at the Allied ships. Gilmore's mental antennae began to twitch. "Roussel and Nikolai, stand by," he shouted suddenly. "Get your lasers ready." Simon Bolivar and Excalibur were still astern of the Allies, but were angled up and pointing directly at them, and the two abruptly unleashed a new volley of torpedoes at close range. The lasers on Nikolai and Roussel's opened up in return, but the closeness of the attackers meant there was less time to intercept all the incoming fire. More got through, and Roussel and Enterprise shook with further blows. Now the two attackers were passing beneath the Allies and were close enough to use their own lasers. Beams raked all 5 ships, scorching trails along their hulls, fusing exposed circuitry and mechanisms, knocking out systems. That was a dirty trick, Gilmore thought. Well, they started it. "Algol Enterprise," he said. "Stand by to target their main engines as they go past. All targets Simon Bolivar first." The two attackers were now ahead of the Allies. "Fire," he said, and the 3 beams converged on Simon Bolivar's main engine block. Main engines were built to take a stream of fusion explosions, but the combined energy of 3 beams caused the metal to glow red, then white, and then erupt in a cloud of molten vapor. As Simon Bolivar started to tumble, they switched fire to Excalibur, but the ship was already too far away and the lasers did less damage. "Yes!" Nickel shouted as the South American ship began to tumble. At that speed, and now with no main engine to slow down, Simon Bolivar was well out of the conflict. The crew should be able to work it into a higher orbit until repairs are finished. Excalibur turned to brake and took up position behind Pacifica and Shivaji, abandoning its ally to sort out his own problems. Then Pacifica and Shivaji opened up again with more grape shot, and again Long March sent in its own burst from astern. "Roussel, Algol, return fire," Gilmore said, and the 2 ships did so with a barrage of their own torpedoes. Ark Royal shivered from another blow, A piece of shot had struck the bow and glanced along it, again hitting the invitingly flat, broad front face of the ring compartment. This time the ship wasn't punctured, and there wasn't enough force in the blow to start another spin. Strangely, Gilmore thought with pity of Suritamiji, the gentle Hindu in command of Shivaji. He didn't doubt that the NVN were breathing down his neck and had maybe taken over altogether. They were firing the torpedoes. They were planning the destruction of the ships that opposed them, not Amiji. But this kind of thing could really strain a friendship. And what was Shivaji's battle AI doing now? What was going through its tiny little mind? And to think that it was on the same ship as his own software officer. Peter Curtin would work out a way to battle it, no doubt. "The ship is manoeuvring," Armwild said. "Great Zimbabwe, I believe." The ship above them was rotating to face down towards the planet and the Alliance ships. Gilmore pictured the scene from its crew's point of view, the entire length of Algol in front of them, unmissable. "Ong, tell your crew to brace," he said. "Expect—" "Tell me something I don't know, Gilmore," Ong snapped. Algol had already started to turn towards the South African ship. I apologise, the Southern African ship. "We're—" Great Zimbabwe unleashed a burst of torpedoes, pumping them into Algol at a point-blank range of a mile. It might as well have been a solid mass of metal. Algol shuddered visibly, and some debris must have passed right through because her skin erupted on the far side, away from the impact. Algol was tumbling, and thrusters spurted on her hull as her crew tried to get her under control. A point on Great Zimbabwe's prow glowed red, then white. "Got her!" Ong shouted. "Sealed her tube shut." "Rule 4, keep her distance." "What's your damage, Algol?" Gilmore said. "Still assessing." A pause. "Casualties." Ong sounded strained. "At least 20. Severe holing, majority of central compartments punctured. Fore and aft systems operating independently, connecting lines severed. Thanks to the advice to depressurize, Ark Royal. We'd have been torn apart if we had had air. But this passive resistance thing is a mug's game. We've got to take the fight to them." "No," Gilmore insisted. "We're the injured parties here. We mustn't be seen to get aggressive. Your ship hasn't just been riddled by grape shot. You haven't just been rendered unfit for spaceflight, and you haven't just lost crew. If you've got a better plan, let's hear it." Newcomer, sir?" Nicole said cautiously. Radar showed another ship rising up from orbit, maintaining a safe distance from the others. The ease with which it sustained its orbit, and the fact that it just stopped 100 miles away, showed it to be a Rusty, as if there could have been any doubt. The ship was too far away to be caught up in any of the fighting. "Come to watch, I suppose," Nichols said bitterly. "Wonder how they feel about this." Then he remembered. "Sorry, Armwild." "I understand," Armwild said. "Believe me, they will not be enjoying this." "So why don't your people step in and stop it then?" "I expect they have their reasons," Gilmore said. The reply was automatic. He didn't much feel like conversation with his juniors right now, and it wasn't fair to dump guilt on Armwild. But despite himself, it sparked off a new thought process. Why didn't the Rusties step in? Because they had their reasons, which were unknowable. "They do," Armwild said. "You do not at present pose a threat to us." "You mean as long as we're just chucking lumps at each other?" said Dickel. "Precisely. You are in a sufficiently high orbit for it not to matter." "So when would it start mattering?" Nickel was beginning to sound desperate. "Keep an eye on the enemy," Gilmore said sharply, to snap the younger man out of what he sensed was a rising cycle of hysteria. Armwild still answered the question. "We cannot become involved in your conflict, Lieutenant. You will have to judge for yourselves when it would start to matter." "Armwild," Gilmore said, "I take it you put us in this high orbit for a reason." "Precisely the reason I have stated, Captain, so that any fighting between yourselves would not affect us." "What would I do in your place?" Gilmore wondered out loud. "I'm inviting a fleet of armed alien ships to take up position around my world, and I'm fairly certain they're going to start squabbling." Armwild simply looked at him, but Gilmore had a sudden notion that the Rusty was willing him towards a conclusion. "Maybe," he continued, "I'd declare a zone in orbit, let their fighting confine itself to that, but if it extends beyond it—" Yet another burst of grape shot broke off the train of thought, but again Ark Royal's laser opened up. It was all happening so quickly, automatic laser was the only way. He looked thoughtfully at Shivaji's image. The Confederation ship's laser would be connected to the battle AI, bound to be. No point in having two systems doing the same job in parallel, with one perhaps making its own innocent plans when the other depended on it to do something else. Krishnamurti's people had taken great care not to offend the Rusties, and so the battle AI would have been programmed with certain safeguards. For instance, if they had really wanted to eliminate the Allies, a volley of fusion warheads would have done the trick. Just as with the great shot, some would have got through, and with the ships all grouped together so, but no nuclear explosions in orbit would certainly annoy the Rusties. Gilmore looked again at Shivaji and grinned. "Mr. Nichol," he said, "stand by to plot a course and power up the main engine. Comms, get me the other captains. Algol, can you still manoeuvre? We need you facing Shivaji." Remember, you can buy my books at www.benjeeps.com. See you next time.